All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Mental Health Entrepreneurs Podcast, where we want to dive into creative ideas to address mental health needs. To that end, today I am talking to Erica Whitfield, who is a therapist specializing in neurodiverse clients, and she offers some creative coaching programs and also has some big ideas to better help this group of people. So, Erica, welcome.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you for having me on.
Of course, it's great to have you here. So, I know in conversations with people I have a lot, this whole term neurodiversity comes up. And I'm curious, since this is an area of expertise for you, how would you define neurodiversity?
Sure. And, to a certain extent, all of us humans are neurodivergent. No two people think exactly in the same ways. But
Mm-hmm.
when we think about the ways that I feel like are commonly seen as neurodivergent, we're talking about our kids who may think in ways that deviate from what we consider to be the norm. So these may be our kids or people who have been diagnosed with ADHD or with
Mm-hmm.
autism. Or many people don't know a term called twice exceptional, where you're gifted, but you also struggle with a learning disorder or a mental health issue. And
Mm-hmm.
so, because of that, our brains may be wired differently, but we don't necessarily think in the same ways that we consider the norm. And so, this is what I really think of when I think of that term neurodivergent.
Yeah, yeah. Thinking in different ways, really. And I think about what an asset that can be when we think about creativity and creative problem solving. Thinking differently is actually a good thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I work a lot with gifted children,
Mm-hmm.
and there's research out there by Betts and Nyhart. It came out in 1988, and it even talked about how even in the gifted community, there can be 6 different types of gifted individuals. So
Wow.
all brilliant people, but they think in dramatically different ways. There's a type called the successful type, very structured, organized, focused on success, to your twice exceptional that we already discussed, to even a group that identifies as being underground. They're gifted, but they don't necessarily feel like they're in a setting where they can really show their gifts.
Ah,
We have the creative and challenging, the autonomous. There's even a type called the dropout risk. So, even the gifted get stereotyped as just being this group of people who are exceptional in many different ways. But even in that population, we see all the different varieties of how our different ways of thinking can come to life.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as we've seen this kind of bubble up, I see it in the media, I hear it talked about more and more. Do you feel like it's normally represented in helpful ways to these individuals, or do you see some issues there?
Tell me more about that too. When you say, is it represented in helpful ways?
Well, I hear a lot of language of, do we use the term neurodiversity or do we not? We have the
Ah,
atypical, typical, right? We have the autism. Should we call somebody autistic or do they want to be termed on the autism spectrum? There's just all this
ah,
languaging, and I feel like how we talk about this matters. So I wonder if you
yes.
have any insight on that as well.
Yes, that is such a phenomenal question. And I really think it comes down to what the individual prefers. And
Yeah.
I know that can be difficult because our brains need a way to organize information.
Hmm.
But what I've noticed, even in certain types of communities, like the autism community, there's a portion of the community that still identifies with the puzzle piece. There's a portion of that community that says, absolutely not, it's degrading, and we want to use the infinity symbol. So
Mm,
even in, like, again, even in our certain groups of neurodivergent individuals, I think it's so important when we start thinking about labels is, does this person want to identify with that label? Is this label going to be beneficial for them or not, in their opinion?
yeah.
And then if they are given a label, how is that helping them? And then what are the unintentional consequences of them having that label too? So these are all conversations that I like to have with the kids that come in to see me and their parents
Mm,
to decide, what do we want to do here? What do we want to call this? Do we want to call this anything?
great. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And so in terms of you deciding to specialize with this group, what has that journey been looked like? Maybe what was your inspiration and how have you developed that expertise?
Sure. I had this awesome opportunity to be involved in a really cool network in my community. And it was a partnership between mental health providers, several mental health providers in our community, the school system,
Mm.
and then also a network of nonprofit organizations. And they all came together to ensure that there were mental health treatment services in the school. And so because of that, I was able to get so much exposure to all different types of students.
Mm-hmm.
And a student that, the type of student that really started to speak to me was the student that was misunderstood, the student that was getting in trouble a lot, the student whose needs weren't being recognized.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know it back then, but a lot of those students were the neurodivergent students. And I can still remember, of course, I won't say them, but I still remember their names so clearly in my mind because there was so much confusion about why these kids were acting the way they were acting. And the more I studied and learned about what it means to be neurodivergent, what it means to have ADHD, autism, what it means to be gifted, the more it started to connect of like, oh, that's why he was engaging in that behavior. That's why these behavioral interventions were not working. That's why he had that fixation on the certain object. So
Yeah.
that's where my love came from, just being with these kids and seeing their needs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. And so let's talk a little bit about the therapy that you've developed, and then I also want to launch into your coaching program. But let's start with because the therapy came first. Is that right?
That's
Okay.
right.
So let's start with that.
Sure. So I had worked in the school system for about 10 years, and then I decided to start my own private practice.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, I just knew I wanted to work with kids. And then I realized that a lot of high functioning, a lot of gifted kids were coming to my practice. And I said, okay, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
um, and through this, even I had the original stereotype that I was going to be working with just like a group of high performers, type A kids, kids who were super organized, kids who never got into any kind of trouble. But what I
Mm.
realized was that no, there was so much diversity in these brilliant children and teens that were coming to see me. And so that's when I got introduced to the fact that some of them were struggling with their attention and focus. And
Yeah.
some of them had hypersensitivities where they were easily triggered by things like light and sound. Some of them had hyposensitivities. So they're
Mm.
giving their friends hugs, but they don't realize they're squeezing the life out of their friend.
Yes.
Or they just think that they're tapping someone, but to that other child, it feels like a punch because they're
Mm-hmm.
not feeling the sensation as much as your typical kid would. Um, so I started providing therapy that specialized specifically to address these issues because a lot of parents feel stuck. The school systems are so well-meaning. They do everything that they can to make sure that things are in place and accommodations are made, but there's still a lack of understanding of what this population needs.
Mm-hmm. I think across the board, I think not even just in school systems, but in social service systems and community systems, there's a lot of confusion and maybe misunderstanding.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. All right. And so then that led you to develop this coaching program. I love, we hear about coaching programs for adults all the time, whether it's executive coaching or life coaching, wellness coaching, but this is specifically for kids. So can you tell me more about what you're doing for coaching with kids?
Absolutely. So the coaching program is really for my gifted kids that come in who feel like the weight of the world is on their shoulders. They've been stereotyped as that gifted child who should have all of the answers, who should not
Mm-hmm.
have any problems, who should know everything. And the stress of that is alarming. And the thing about a lot of the kids that I work with in this coaching program is that they don't feel like they should ask for help. They've
Mm.
internalized these messages of being put on like this wisdom pedestal of being this all-knowing person that they feel embarrassed if they have to reach out and ask for help. They feel like they're going to be judged. They feel like maybe they're even losing a bit of their intelligence because they don't know
Mm,
something. So there's imposter syndrome, they're looking around the class and comparing themselves to other people. And then imagine gifted programs are primarily dominated by the stereotypical gifted student who makes all A's. Now imagine
yeah.
being a twice exceptional child who's gifted but may also have a learning disorder, but you're in
Right.
this classroom primarily filled with the stereotypical gifted
Mm,
child. So the group is about talking about all of these things and
mm,
talking about all of the ways that we show our brilliance, our strengths, our vulnerabilities, and then just about supporting each other and having that connection.
yeah, that's phenomenal. And so what have you found in running these groups? What's kind of happening in between the group members? What kind of learning are you seeing happening?
Sure. Well, it's really interesting to see the different types of kids interact with each other. So mind
Yeah.
you, they're all like these super smart kids, but some are very black and white and concrete thinkers. Okay, so
Oh,
there's like a
yeah.
right answer or a wrong answer. And then some who are more autonomous in nature, they can are creative and challenging, they can think outside the box and they challenge the status quo. So it's really cool to see like the debates that can take place in the group just because of the different ways of thinking, but it's
Mhm.
also cool for them to experience the fact that there's a different perspective that we can have on a topic, and that
Mm,
perspective isn't necessarily right or wrong. It's really about what works best for us. Why don't we take in the things that make sense for us, and then the things that don't make sense, okay, that may not be for us and we don't have to try their strategies. So it's
mm,
neat to just hear the different perspectives that happen in the group. So that's one thing I've really taken away from it. And then just like the magic that happens when we're in these sessions. The last coaching session I had really was predominated by like that challenging and creative type.
mm.
And we did a session one day where literally one kid pulls out his guitar and serenades us, with a song that he just wrote. Another one of our kids, she like serenaded us with this beautiful song that she sang in session. And then right after that, another kid's like, and here's this awesome picture that I just painted. And it was so cool to have this space where our creativity could just be celebrated.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. So how do you figure out the right fit for these groups? Are there certain things? Are you talking to them individually first, maybe their parents? I'm curious about that process.
Yeah, so usually before kids join the coaching group, they come in as individual clients. And so we've had time to really get to know them and know what
Hmm.
makes them tick. So we try to craft our groups by putting kids together who could really just um, flourish off of the energy of the other kids that are going to be in the group as well.
Yeah,
So we're really intentional about how we put our groups together so that our kids can have the best experience.
awesome. And how'd you come up with this idea too? I'm curious about that. Instead of making it a therapy group, you made it coaching. So I'd love to hear that thought process too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's the thing, with our gifted kids and experiencing imposter syndrome, many of them want nothing to do with therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll say, I'm fine, I don't need any help. So, but if we call it a coaching group, then I've noticed that they're more open to that.
Mm,
Um, and then another thing that we do too to get them on board is after they participate in the group, they can come back and help me lead it. So they get to impact the
mm.
next generation of kids after them that are going to do the group too. And that's what they love, because then they can really step into like that leadership role and that expertise role. And you can really see them come to life. And what I like most is I think they may even get, in terms of content, more out of the experience when they come back and teach it, because now they're in charge of like making sure that this next group of people really retains the information.
Right. I mean, teaching is the best way to learn something, right? Because you have to
Mm.
know it so well. So that's exciting. I'd like to dive into some of your other big ideas. What's on the horizon for you? What are things that you're thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am just in, I have really started to embrace this idea that I am going to be like this solo traveler. So I just
Ah.
recently took a trip to Ireland. And one of the things that I've always wanted to do, to connect this back to your question, I promise I haven't gotten off track. Um,
It's okay if you do.
I I want to take this coaching program and the work that I've done with the schools. And, we're even at the schools right now doing trainings to help teachers understand like how to have neurodivergent friendly classrooms. We're doing all of this work. So I want to take it and put it together and start a school.
Mhm.
And not even necessarily something that's going to be like this traditional brick and mortar building.
Mhm.
I would love to start something like a travel school. So we're building our confidence. We're gaining these incredible experiences. We're learning about ourselves. We're gaining so much insight by traveling to different places
Mm.
and learning. And how awesome would it be if not only are we enhancing our personal development by doing this, but we're also getting credit for school. Okay.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
want to create a school that really focuses like on this neurodivergent, this gifted population.
Hmm. And I just think about how hands-on that could be, right? With learning different subjects, history, culture, all of those pieces, depending on where you would go. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How do you envision that working with like kind of kids all over the country coming
Yeah.
together? Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm just
Well,
picturing it in my head. Hmm.
yeah. I always think like, grassroots initiatives are always the way to go. So I can
Mm.
see it being like maybe even like the alumni of our coaching programs, all the kids who have participated in our balanced intensity coaching program coming together. And we start by taking a trip to Ireland or to Switzerland or somewhere like that. And then branching it
Mm.
out and making this something that could be accessible to anywhere, to
Yeah.
anyone.
That's amazing. Do you how where are you in the process of this? Just sort of, it sounds like this is like a little bit of like the incubator stage, maybe?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So right now, I'm actually putting together a little test run with adults. So I'm taking a group of 6 therapists to Ireland, and we're actually just going to make this like a conference type thing, like a really small conference. Where we're going to get together, almost like a retreat, and we're going to talk about all of these things that I've learned over time that can help our neurodivergent kids.
Hmm.
Um, we're going to talk about like strategies outside of behavioral strategies that can be used, the importance of connection. We're going to be talking about like how to help our kids lean into their gifts versus just focusing on the vulnerabilities that we often associate with problems that we see with our kids in schools. So we're going to do a learning experience there. And from that, I want to branch it out and start offering these trips to our parents here at our practice
Mm.
and start taking our kids outside of the country into these awesome new places with their parents and just seeing how that develops over time. And then eventually we'll turn that into something where they can even get school credits for attending these trips.
Awesome. I love that. You have this amazing plan.
Thank you so much.
And it is
Yeah, I'm
such a
really
creative
excited about it.
idea. Yeah, you should be. You should be. So, what has this entrepreneurial journey been like for you? You're obviously a creative thinker yourself. This is an idea I really don't think I've heard of anywhere else, right? Which is exciting. But I'm curious what that's been like with you developing your business, developing these programs, and then going into this new venture as well.
Absolutely. And Rachel, I intentionally paused there. I'm going to plug my computer up because I'm embarrassed to admit that I forgot and the battery's almost dead. So 1 second.
No worries. I can tell you of a story if it makes you feel better. I was a podcast host
Sure.
and did the same thing. And I was sitting here like trying not to interrupt it and going like this with one finger and like going down here and fumbling with my cords. So all good.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to try to remember your question so you do not have to ask that again. So what was my journey as an entrepreneur? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let me pause
Feel free.
for the
Take a
editing
moment.
purposes. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So my journey as a mental health entrepreneur has been incredible. I mean, just from starting in the school system to identifying these needs that were present there, to then being able to have creative freedom now to bring to life anything that I want. I mean, that's invaluable.
Mm.
I think the biggest part about being an entrepreneur is the mental battles that you have to fight with yourself. When I was first getting started, there were so many times where I had to say, like, oh, is this going to work? What am I doing here? Should I go back? Should I, there's all of these fears and insecurities that start to enter your mind when you're creating something new that maybe no one else is even doing. And you're wondering if it's going to work.
Yeah.
But it's so cool now to be on the other side of that, where I'm like 100% sure now. I'm 110% sure of, holy smokes, this works. This is an incredible business. I am impacting so many people in positive ways. And I'm going to keep going and grow this as big as I can get it.
Wow. That confidence is something I don't hear a lot from entrepreneurs. How do you think you got there?
By first just being put in situations that were scary, but I just had to figure them out.
Mm.
And building off of that confidence, like knowing, like, okay, I got through this thing. So
Right.
here's another scary thing. I can get through that. And honestly, keeping a gratitude list too. So I've been keeping a gratitude list for the last 5 years on my phone.
Wow.
And whenever something major happens, whether it be this really great thing, I put it on the list. Whenever something scary happens, but I figured my way through it, I put it on the list.
Mm.
And so, especially, and it's funny because the bigger you get, the scarier your problems can get sometimes.
I know.
So I take that list out and I read through it. And it's so crazy because, like, I'll surprise myself, like, oh, yeah, that really scary thing happened back then, but I figured it out. And I also believe that when you're on the right track and you're doing something that you should be doing, you are going to get resources that come to you from out of nowhere to help you through difficult obstacles too. And that's the
Mhm.
really, really cool thing. So on the days where I'm like, oh, geez, all right, Erica, how are you going to get through this one? I take a step back and I'm like, you know what? Something's coming to help me get to the next level of this. And it
Mm.
always does every
Mhm.
single time, because I'm aligned with what I'm doing. I'm acting in integrity. And I don't think you can ever go wrong when you're doing those things.
I agree. I agree. I sort of bring the concept of flow. That's how I conceptualize that, right? If you're moving in that flow of the energy and everything, like it will all work. It will all be what it's supposed to be. It's pretty amazing.
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. So last question, we're almost out of time here, but is there a piece of advice that you would give to other mental health entrepreneurs or people that just have a creative idea that they might want to implement? What would you say to those folks?
Sure. I would say know that the more creative your idea is, and the more your brain may try to convince you not to do this thing because it sounds so outside of the box, I think that's your giant green waving flag that you need to lean completely into it. Because
Mm,
no person on this earth can be the person that we are. No one can be me like I can be me. No one can be Rachel like Rachel can be Rachel.
yeah.
We're put here for a very specific reason, to bring something very specific to life. And so really lean into that, because that's where the magic lies. And then you imagine diving so deep into this focus that you have and this passion and desire, so much so to the point where no one else even knows the things that you know because you become that much of an expert into it.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you can open up some really magical things for yourself. So dive deep into it and ask yourself this question too. Am I doing these things because I feel like I have to do them? Or am I doing these things because I want to do them? And if you feel like you're doing something because your idea won't come to life, there's a red flag. Lean into the things that you want to do. Have faith in yourself that you can bring those things to life. And little by little, you'll see that progress happen to the point where you have that big confidence to say, oh, well, I did this. And now you're inspiring another group of people to do exactly what you've done. And you've spread this huge positive energy wave out into the world. That's going to keep going.
Amazing. I love that. Well, thank you so much for being willing to talk to us. I love the programs that you're doing. I cannot wait to hear about this school stuff. So keep talking to me about that. Maybe we'll bring you back in a year or two and have you talk about how all of that is going and the next things on your horizon.
Sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Of course.